Ruthless biker punches. Elderly black woman. KO, unaware, her son is off duty, Navy SEAL. It was a peaceful afternoon in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of day when the world seems to slow down and nothing feels rushed. An elderly black woman, Ms. Johnson, walked steadily along the sidewalk, leaning on her cane. She was heading home after picking up a few groceries, her warm smile greeting anyone she passed. Everyone in the area knew her. She was a friendly face, always ready to help others and share a story or two. But on this particular day, something was different. As she reached the corner, a loud roar pierced the air. It was the sound of a motorcycle, engine revving aggressively. Heads turned as a biker sped through the street, completely ignoring traffic rules. People watched with a mix of concern and irritation as the man, wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses, flew by without a care for anyone else. He stopped abruptly near Ms. Johnson, the sudden screech of his brakes startling her. The biker, a tall, muscular man with an intimidating presence, seemed agitated, as if the world was his to control. He glanced around and saw Ms. Johnson, slowly, making her way past him, minding her own business. Without warning, he snapped. "Move faster, lady," he barked, his voice filled with anger. Ms. Johnson, startled, turned her head slightly, but kept moving at her own pace. She wasn't one to rush, and she certainly wasn't going to let anyone force her to. But what happened next shocked everyone. In a sudden, violent move, the biker stepped off his motorcycle and walked up to her. Before anyone could react, he shoved Ms. Johnson with force, sending her stumbling. She gasped in surprise, but that wasn't the end of it. The biker, without hesitation, threw a punch. Ms. Johnson, fragile and unsuspecting, was knocked to the ground, unconscious. The small crowd that had gathered was frozen in shock. Who could do such a thing? Who would attack an elderly woman, let alone one as kind as Ms. Johnson? The biker smirked, as if proud of his actions, then casually got back on his motorcycle, ready to ride off as if nothing had happened. But he didn't realize something important. Ms. Johnson wasn't alone in this world. As she lay on the ground, hurt and helpless, a figure in the crowd stepped forward. It was her son. He had just returned from deployment, an off-duty Navy SEAL, who had seen more than his fair share of combat and injustice. His calm demeanor hid the storm of emotions brewing inside him. He had been home for only a few days, enjoying some much-needed time off, and had planned to surprise his mother that afternoon. He'd been following her from a distance, wanting to catch up with her and walk her home. But now, as he watched his mother lying on the cold pavement, something in him snapped. The biker, completely unaware of who he was dealing with, revved his engine again, preparing to leave the scene. The crowd was still in shock, unsure of what to do, but Ms. Johnson's son, silent and composed, made his move. What the biker didn't know was that this wasn't going to end the way he thought. As the Navy SEAL approached him, there was no fear in his steps, only a quiet determination. The biker still had no clue what was about to happen. He was about to come face to face with someone who had trained for years to handle situations far more dangerous than this. The tension in the air was thick. The biker noticed the man walking toward him, but seemed unfazed. He was used to people being scared of him, intimidated by his size and aggression. But this time, something felt different. The look in the SEAL's eyes wasn't one of fear. It was something else entirely. And that's when the biker made his final mistake. As he revved his engine one last time, preparing to speed away from the chaos he had caused, the SEAL calmly stepped in front of the bike. The crowd, still watching in silence, held their breath. What would happen next? The air was thick with tension as Ms. Johnson's son, the off-duty Navy SEAL, stood in front of the biker, blocking his path. The crowd held their breath, watching the scene unfold, unsure of what was going to happen next. The biker, still oblivious to the danger he was in, smirked, assuming this was just another bystander trying to play the hero. But there was something in the way the SEAL stood, calm, composed, and without a trace of fear, that set him apart. For a brief moment, the biker paused, his hand still gripping the throttle of his motorcycle. He was trying to size up the situation, but his arrogance got the better of him. With a sneer, he revved the engine again, inching the bike forward, as if daring the SEAL to back down. But Ms. Johnson's son didn't move an inch. He locked eyes with the biker, his expression steady, but unreadable. "What do you think you're doing?" The biker scoffed, clearly irritated that someone was challenging him. "Get out of my way before you regret it." But the SEAL wasn't moved by the threat. In his world, this wasn't a challenge. It was just another situation to handle, another mission to complete. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was there to make sure his mother was safe. And this biker understood the consequences of his actions. Before the biker could react, the SEAL spoke in a voice so calm, it sent a chill down the biker's spine. "You hurt my mother," he said quietly, but every word was packed with an intensity that couldn't be ignored. The biker's smirk faded slightly, but he still refused to back down, unaware of the full gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, the crowd, which had grown larger, began to murmur. Some were pulling out their phones, not wanting to miss whatever was about to happen. Others were tending to Ms. Johnson, who had regained consciousness but was still dazed and hurt from the sudden attack. Her son glanced back briefly, ensuring she was being looked after, before turning his full attention back to the biker. The tension between the two men hung in the air, thick and heavy. The biker, still trying to act tough, revved his engine once more, but the SEAL didn't flinch. He knew how to handle this. And despite his calm exterior, there was a storm of emotions brewing inside him. Rage at seeing his mother hurt, frustration at the injustice, and the unshakable need to protect the woman who had raised him. As the crowd watched, unaware of the full story, Ms. Johnson's son's mind raced back to his childhood. He had grown up in that very neighborhood, raised by a single mother who had worked tirelessly to provide for him. Ms. Johnson wasn't just anyone to him. She was everything. She had always been there, always strong, always kind. And now, seeing her treated like this, like she didn't matter, was more than he could stand. But the SEAL wasn't the kind of man to act on impulse. His years of training had taught him how to control his emotions, how to think clearly in the face of danger. He knew that if he lost his cool, things could escalate quickly. And he didn't want that. Not here. Not with his mother watching. He had to handle this the right way. That biker, still completely unaware of who he was dealing with, finally spoke again, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Look, I'm not in the mood for this," he growled, his hand tightening on the throttle. "Get out of my way, or I'll run you over too." The SEAL stood his ground, his eyes never leaving the bikers. He could see the bravado, the false confidence, and he knew how this was going to end. But before he could say anything, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a voice shouted, "That's Ms. Johnson's son. He's military." The biker's expression shifted, just for a split second. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected his victim to have a son who was trained to handle situations far more dangerous than this. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder as more people recognized the SEAL, and the atmosphere shifted. For the first time, the biker seemed to hesitate, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. He clenched his jaw and revved the engine again, trying to maintain control of the situation. But the seal had already read him like a book. In a calm but firm voice, the seal said, "You don't want to do this." There was no threat in his tone, but the weight of his words hung in the air. The biker's confidence wavered. But he was in too deep now. He had to make a decision. Either he would walk away and face the humiliation of backing down, or he would escalate the situation and risk something far worse than a bruised ego. The crowd watched in silence, the tension building with every passing second. Ms. Johnson, still on the ground but conscious now, looked at her son with a mixture of pain and pride. She knew he was a protector, not just of her, but of everyone who couldn't protect themselves. And just as the biker made his choice, revving the engine louder, the seal moved. With lightning speed, he reached out and grabbed the biker's arm, his grip firm but controlled. The crowd gasped as the situation seemed to teeter on the edge of chaos. The biker, caught off guard by the seal's precision, froze. He had never been in a situation like this before. And now, he realized he had underestimated the man standing in front of him. The seal leaned in slightly, his voice low but powerful. "You have two options. You walk away, or we finish this. But trust me, you won't like how it ends." The biker, now fully aware of the danger he was in, swallowed hard. He could feel the strength in the seal's grip, the quiet authority in his words. The crowd watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. The biker's hand twitched on the throttle, torn between his stubborn pride and the undeniable reality of the situation. His heart raced, and for the first time, he felt a chill of fear creeping up his spine. The seal's grip on his arm was firm, yet there was a controlled restraint in it, like a coiled spring that hadn't fully released. The biker's eyes darted around, catching glimpses of the crowd, now fully focused on him. Phones were recording, whispers were spreading, and the weight of his decision pressed down on him. He had never faced someone like this before. In his world, he could intimidate, scare, and bully his way through any confrontation. But this was different. This man standing before him wasn't just any random passerby. This was someone who had been through battles, who knew how to handle himself under pressure, and who clearly wouldn't let this go. And on top of all that, this was the son of the very woman he had just knocked down. The seal, still calm and steady, loosened his grip slightly, giving the biker one final chance. His eyes, full of quiet determination, locked onto the biker's, with an intensity that spoke louder than words. This wasn't about ego or showing off. This was about justice, about protecting what was right. The seal had given him a choice, and now the biker had to make it. For a long moment, there was silence. The biker's face twisted with frustration as he realized he was trapped. No amount of aggression or revving his engine would change what was happening. Finally, with a deep, grudging exhale, he killed the engine, the deafening roar of the motorcycle falling silent. The crowd let out a collective breath, the tension in the air easing slightly, but no one moved. The seal released the biker's arm, stepping back just a little, but his eyes never left him. "Walk away," he said, his voice even but commanding. The biker, now feeling the weight of his defeat, gritted his teeth. He didn't say anything. There were no words left that could save his pride now. He swung his leg over the motorcycle, standing up straight for the first time. But he refused to make eye contact with the seal again, slowly. And with the eyes of the entire crowd on him, the biker began to walk away, his footsteps heavy with the shame of his actions. As he left the scene, the murmurs from the crowd grew louder, some people shaking their heads, others whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. The tension that had gripped the street for so long finally began to dissipate. Ms. Johnson, still recovering from the shock of it all, looked up at her son with a mixture of gratitude and pride. She had raised him to be strong, to stand up for what was right, and now, seeing him handle the situation with such grace and control, her heart swelled with love. Her son knelt down beside her, his face softening as he gently took her hand. "You okay, Mom?" he asked quietly, his voice full of concern. Ms. Johnson smiled weakly, nodding, though her body still ached from the attack. "I'm okay, baby," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Thanks to you." The crowd began to disperse, the intensity of the moment fading into quiet conversations. Some people stayed behind to check on Ms. Johnson, offering their support, while others simply left, taking with them the memory of what had just unfolded. The seal, now fully focused on his mother, helped her to her feet, making sure she was steady before guiding her toward a nearby bench. As they sat together, Ms. Johnson looked at her son with a knowing smile. "You didn't have to do all that," she said softly, her voice filled with motherly affection. The seal chuckled, shaking his head. "You know I couldn't let him get away with that, Mom," she sighed, her eyes reflecting years of wisdom and strength. "You've always been my protector," she said, "even when you were little. I'm proud of you. But I don't want you to carry the weight of this world's ugliness on your shoulders." Her son nodded, understanding her words. But deep down, he knew he couldn't have done anything differently. He had to stand up for her, for what was right. That was who he was. And that was what she had taught him to be. The tension of the day was finally lifting, replaced by a sense of calms and quiet reflection. The seal knew this moment wasn't just about the fight. It was about something bigger. It was about standing up for the vulnerable, about showing strength when it mattered most, and about doing it with honor. His mother had been his foundation all his life, and today was his chance to show her just how much she meant to him. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Ms. Johnson leaned on her son's shoulder, her heart full, despite the pain she had endured. Together, they sat in the fading light, the chaos of the afternoon slowly becoming a memory, one that would remind everyone there that justice doesn't always come with violence. Sometimes it comes with quiet strength, calm resolve, and the courage to stand up when it counts. And with that, the two of them walked home, side by side, stronger than ever.